I will call the meeting of the ALPR Review Committee to order. We will begin on our agenda with the first order of business, which is roll call.
Blessum.
Here.
Collum.
Here.
Hancock. Here. Janser.
Here.
Nason.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so continuing on, first thing we're going to do is just do a bit of a welcome. First of all, I want to thank the committee members. We'll maybe have a chance for each of you to introduce yourselves in just a moment here. But this committee was created as part of a council action. As we turn on the ALPR system, it was important to me that we provide some oversight and make sure that to the best of our ability, we're respecting constitutional norms and making sure that we're on the right side of the legal process as we're going through this process. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that's all going to mean. But, so this 5-person committee was created as part of that action, as part of the actions we took to turn on the system. And we'll talk more about what that's going to mean over the coming months as we go through today's meeting. So over time, it's my intention that this committee will be working with the police department on exactly how the system is being used and what types of searches and things like that are being done. We're not at that point today. Today, we're going to spend a bunch of time on reviewing the system, making sure that we understand as a committee what it's capable of doing, how it works, and exactly how the department intends to use it. So this, think of this as the pre-briefing before the system goes into wide scale use. So with that, we'll just go across the board here and make sure that our PD team and everybody else knows the players on the committee. So I'll just start. I asked the mayor in my motion to chair the committee because, being blunt, I'm probably the biggest critic of the system. And so, I'll want to be a part of the discussions that we have as time goes by. My name is Mike Blessum. I'm the president of the Minot City Council right now. As we go through this process, I'll be kind of leading our efforts to work through the system and make sure that we're working in that way. And we'll go down to the mayor next on my left.
Hello, good afternoon. Mark Janser, Mayor of Minot.
Okay, Kyler.
Kyler Collum. I am a resident at large and I suppose member of the local media.
Okay. Michaela?
Michaela McWilliams, City Clerk.
Okay, Tom?
Tom Hancock, I'm a retired Customs and Border Protection Officer. Also worked for the PD for about 9 years. A long time ago, 14 years total with the city.
Okay, Mike?
I'm Mike Nason. I live in the city, of course. I had a career in law enforcement, spent about 35 years plus working with various agencies. Currently, I'm an assistant professor of criminal justice at the university.
Okay. Thank you all for your willingness to participate and be a part of this process and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep ourselves on the right side of the law here. So with that in mind, we'll continue on. So we'll turn it over to your team chief to start with a system overview and talk about the system a little bit. So whether that's Deputy Chief Plessis or wherever you guys would like to go.
Thank you, Chairman Blessum and members of the committee. I want to start off here today with a quick discussion. We know that you are all familiar with LPR to some extent, but we just don't know what level each of you and how much you've paid attention to the council and so forth that has gone on before. So we want to start off assuming that you have not seen everything that's gone on. And one of the things you'll notice is on the memo for this, or the agenda for this, is a LPR or ALPR policy. That policy was amended by the council in a meeting, and those amendments are not on here. The changes are not on this policy. So I just want to briefly touch on some of those so that you are all aware. So one of the things you'll see in here is it's a 30-day policy for retention. That is not true. The council changed that to 10-day retention for data. Another change is there's indication that we'll share data with other agencies. That's been restricted to only sharing individual case data on an individual basis. So in other words, we're not going to be any part to a state database on license plates data coming from our system. And a third component is that there is a command level requirement for approval of searching the system, meaning that in order to search the system, an officer would have to go through their captain, who would actually have to conduct the search only upon approval of either myself as deputy chief or the chief of police. Those are some of the changes that were put into place by the council. The policy, like I said, it's our hope that this committee will be evaluating the policy and that there will be some more recommendations for changes. So those recommendations that they come in will be added, and we'll bring that back to the committee to review, because ultimately our interpretation of what you say, you have to have the final say on it. And then of course the council has to make the final say in determining what the policy is actually gonna be written. The next thing I wanted to talk to, there was some question or concerns about records, open records law, and how this pertains to this system. And so we did some research in terms of open records. We're guided by North Dakota Century Code 44-04-18, which is access to public records. And that section of code basically says what kind of public records need to be released. But under 4404-18.7, you'll find there's a provision that criminal intelligence and criminal investigative information is not applicable to 4404-18. So in other words, it's our interpretation, because of the way we use this system, that any data that we collect under our policy, we will not use without a case. It's all case information. We cannot access it without actually having a criminal case, which is an important a precept to this, because in order for us to consider that intelligence information, we have to be treating it as intelligence. So under that provision, that's how we view it. Now, in making this decision, I also consulted with our city attorney. I consulted with other agencies throughout the state. The Bismarck deputy chief, I talked to them about their system and their interpretation of it. And I also talked to the head of the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, just to ensure that we're on the same page and we all are consistent in how we view this data. It's intelligence information, and therefore there are certain restrictions that we have on it. I also,
Chief Plessis, could I hold up for just a second? And Steph, it might be something you have to answer for me. So in your discussions, to me, there's a bit of a conundrum you run into when you're talking about the base data itself, which essentially is 99+% innocent, right? There's nothing related to any case. It's just there because it's being collected all over town all the time. So those records are not part of any case. They're, in my opinion, they would not be part of any investigative process. They're not part of anything. They just exist in a database. Just like I could stand on the street, as everybody says, and mark down license plates as they go by, right? So to me, why would those not be open records? Why would those not be treated like me standing on the street and writing them down? Where I can understand that you wouldn't be able to give out searches. That makes sense to me because it's part of the investigative process, and that seems to be covered very clearly. But the example that I gave during council was if as an employer, I decide one of my employees is playing hooky and skipping work when he shouldn't be, and I want to know where he's going during the day, and oh, he's showing up at the golf course. Could I have you guys query the database to see where he's been? And I realize you got the chief saying no, but to me, there's these two pieces of data are two very different things. One of them is not part of an investigative process, and we've been told very clearly that it's not part of an investigative process. So I see the city attorney stepping up, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Plessis, members of the committee. So I have a call with the Attorney General's office, the portfolio holder for open records, open meetings tomorrow morning at 2, or tomorrow afternoon at 2. And I'll ask this exact question to them and just kind of play out this scenario. Currently, my opinion is that the whole purpose for why we're collecting this data is for criminal intelligence investigative information. We're only holding it for 10 days. That would be the only reason why we would be running that type of a query into that system. So that would be my argument for why we should be able to be protected, but I'll run that exact scenario past the portfolio holder tomorrow and see if they concur with that or if they think that that's not something that would be acceptable. That would be the person who would be reviewing that question if we were subjected to an open meetings complaint and we had to defend that decision. So I think it'll be helpful to kind of talk through that process and see if that's something that's on the radar.
Okay. And so are you tracking what I'm saying? Because again, the data as it sits in the database to me is not part of any investigative record. It's not being used for anything until a case comes and there's a search that's actually run. To me, those are two completely different things.
But the investigative component though of it, the whole reason why we're gathering all of it is so that we can run that query if a question should arise, and it's only going to arise in the criminal context.
Okay.
And so if somebody does submit an open records question for the exact scenario you have there, somebody from the public says, hey, I want to see what LPR data you have in your database concerning this license plate number. Our response would be that's currently criminal investigative information and it's protected. It's currently an exempt record and it's up to us as to whether or not we want to release it. And our choice right now is no, because we could use it for a criminal case in the next 10 days. But like I said, this is a question that I do want to talk with their portfolio holder at the AG's office and just see if it seems like we're on the right track or if it's something that they'd say, no, we would find that to be a violation. And then we can kind of move forward from there.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And just before you step away, that again, just for committee members, I don't intend to rehash every argument that we walked through on council. That's not my point at all. This is very specific to an open question that we still have. My contention is that those two things can't exist at the same time. If we are holding data simply because we might need it, that's a clear Fourth Amendment violation. Clear, not even close. That makes no sense to me. So those two things can't exist at the same time in my mind. And again, there's more important people in the world than me that are going to make decisions about this stuff. But that's why I get a little bit scared about this, because to me, it's very clear that holding a database of the movements of our residents is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment to start with. And now we're saying that it's all, if it's just innocuous data that anybody could collect, then it's clearly open to open records. It's one or the other. You either have to side on one side or the other. If they find a way to thread that needle, it'll be very interesting to me, and it'll be good to hear that report back, because I guess that'll be clear if they decide that the needle can be threaded that way.
And I mean, it is a very fact specific scenario. So I mean, like, yes, everybody who's out in a public area can be subject to recording. This is a public area, so we're all subject to recording here right now, anytime. But I think it does make a difference to who is doing the recording. If it's somebody who's a private person that's doing a recording in a public area, that's their recording. They own the phone. There's certain protections that apply. So I do think that there are going to be some nuances there that I think that they can walk through. As I'm recalling during a previous conversation too, Deputy Chief Plessis, you had spoken with BCI on this particular topic too, and they had a similar reaction. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. So this is consistent with how this is something that I did address with BCI. I also addressed with Bismarck Police Department. It is consistent with how other agencies are operating. So it's not without precedence, but you are correct. There is no court ruling on this in North Dakota right now, and there's no Attorney General ruling on it.
Well, thank you for that. I think it'll be important for us, both as a committee and then as the council as well, once we get those opinions back and we understand them fully, because I can't get those two things to work together in my mind, that these are fully public records that anybody could create, but they're also protected records that nobody can get at. Those two things don't match in my mind at all.
And I think and Chairman Blessom, members of the committee, I think it is a good discussion to bring to the Attorney General's office, just in light of the technology changing. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for a law to catch up with technology and how it evolves. And so that could be something that could be part of a larger discussion that comes in with this next legislative session too. Right. So I think I think it's prudent to put it on the radar now, talk through the different issues that everybody's seeing. Are there exceptions that need to be carved out to state law to offer the protections we think need to be there while affording the transparency that's expected under the open records laws at the same time? So yeah, I mean, as of right now, it's just a conversation. with the Attorney General's office. I'd be hesitant to call it an opinion at this point because I am just talking to Attorney General Wrigley's portfolio holder. So I mean, in the past, they're always very accommodating when it comes to, hey, will you talk through this question with me and see if have you read anything recently on this lately? Do you know of a different area of law that we aren't looking at? They've always been very accommodating with that too. But as of right now, it is just a conversation with the portfolio holder. I wouldn't go so far as to say this is Attorney General Wrigley's opinion on anything just yet. So just to clarify kind of where we're at in that conversation, and where to hold that in regard to.
Perfect. And you know, before we move back to Chief Pless's committee members, anybody else have questions on this topic? Because we'll move on to other things, but I just want to make sure. Mike, did you have something then?
Yeah, I've got a question. You mentioned Wrigley. Are you talking about the United States Attorney or the Attorney General's office?
No, the Attorney General's office.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm confused. Drew Wrigley is the United States Attorney.
He's the Attorney General for North Dakota.
Yeah.
He was though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
He actually is a federal position right now.
He's
Oh, he actually, yeah, he assumed that position. Okay.
yes.
My
Yep.
question is, do you think that we should ask for an opinion?
I think that'll be a good discussion. I'll probably be better prepared to answer that question after our conversation tomorrow and see if that's one reason why I hesitate is that just the Attorney General's the pace of opinions I think that are getting requested, especially in open records, open
Right.
meetings, is pretty vast. And my understanding in conversations is that there's more and more requests for that happening lately. We have an opinion with the city of Minot that's going to have a second birthday, I think, if it hasn't already. So I mean, it takes a long time for them to get to some of those questions, especially ones that could be as meaty as this is. So not to say that it wouldn't be appropriate and that we couldn't ask for it, but we could ask for it and the legislative session could approach before they have time to really dig in and do the substantive research necessary to do that. So not a dig in any way on their office. They're just, there's only so many hours a day and so many attorneys to draft
Right.
the opinions that are being requested. So
I was
I
just
don't think
thinking in
it's
terms of it having the force of law until a court weighs in on it.
it could be helpful. It could be
Yeah.
helpful. And I think it'll be easier to understand what kind of bandwidth they would have to assist with that kind of a question after my conversation tomorrow.
And to your point, Steph, the BCI had a bill in front of the legislature this session trying to expand use across the state and data sharing and all that stuff. So it's certainly on the radar of the legislature, and there'll be multiple schools of thought. The Transportation Committee wasn't a big fan of that bill. It failed on the House floor. So the question in my mind would be, is the legislature more likely to say, oh, wow, yeah, let's expand all this. Let's do more of this type of stuff. Let's just put some very clear language in place. Or is the more likely answer to be, no, this, taking my approach, which is, no, this isn't a good direction. So we'll see. Cause I think it's becoming a bigger topic over time, and for better or worse, BCI is actually pushing that a little when they're asking for expansion. They were looking for cameras on all DOT signage across the state and data sharing among all agencies. So, we'll see what the legislature does with that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Dale.
Okay, and to that respect, also keep in mind that there is a 10-day limit on it. So our interpretation of this, and like I've said, I have a 25 years of law enforcement experience, and under that 25 years, the Fourth Amendment has been one of the guiding principles to which I work. So I definitely do not want to violate the Fourth Amendment, but I will also suggest that I don't believe I am. The conversations that we've had with attorneys, in this respect, I feel like we are on solid footing. Now, I know there's disagreement on that, and that's ultimately what has to be decided. But in terms of where we're going, we definitely do not want to be afoul of that. In terms of what we can provide, the information we can provide to this body, being it's a public body, is therefore limited in terms of specific case data. So I had our CJIS TAC officer, Margaret Haugen, who is our public safety systems data coordinator for the city of Minot. she contacted the North Dakota CGIS administrator, Jim Crow, and just to make a determination whether this CGIS data can be provided in a public setting, and it cannot. Therefore, we are limited to specific case information that can be released in a public forum. To that respect, there's other data that we are permitted to release. We have, and I know Justin's going to get into it in a little bit, there's a public portal or a potential public portal that we can operate with, and that'll be something that he'll talk to you guys a little bit more about. But that kind of data, that kind of information, that kind of auditing what we are using the system for will be available to you. So just to get into the overview of the system, the kind of a higher level overview. I'm going to start off with a PowerPoint, and afterwards I'm going to play a video. Now the video is out of Ontario, Canada. It's a video we found, actually our public information officer found, and it's just a good overview of how the system works. It is admittedly not our agency doing it, so the policies that they're running under are not our policies. So in there, I think in this video, they say we can use it to determine unlicensed drivers. No, we can't. That's not how we operate. That's not in our policy, right? So just to be clear, there are some things about the video that are inaccurate, but if you take the actual system, that's very, very similar to the system, if not exactly the system that we use. It'll give you an idea what how it operates and how our officers are using it. So just to get started, so we're using the Fleet 3 in video recording system, and its job is to capture license plates as patrol cars are driving through town. There's a camera within that right in the front windshield that is kind of a high-speed camera that is, the main purpose is to capture video, but it also now captures video and audio of traffic stops. It now captures license plates as part of the system. T, can you advance? So some of the misconceptions: it's not facial recognition. It does not track people in real time, and it's not biometric surveillance. I think there were a lot of questions and misinformation out there, so we wanted to get that out. T, go ahead and keep advancing. How does LPR system work? As a car passes in front of the system captures the license plate. It reads it and compares it to a hot list that we've established. This hot list is something that we've agreed on the parameters on, and it will flag for the officers if the license plate matches one of those. If there's no match to that license plate, there's not going to be an alert that comes up from it. Go ahead and advance. So when the officer does receive a hit on that hot list, one of the requirements in policy is that they verify that license plate matches the hot list plate and state. So there aren't mistakes made. Some of the charges or some of the things that are on the hot list are listed here. What's important is that you understand they're all major crimes. We intentionally removed the minor offenses. So we're talking about arson, bank robbery, child abduction. I'm not going to read them all, but basically felony level offenses are serious offenses. Also part of the offenses are civil alerts, Amber alerts, missing people, those kind of things where somebody's actually endangered. The data that's collected is the license plate image, the context of the vehicle. So you're looking at plate, date, time, location where the patrol car was when it captured it, and it inferred vehicle data. So in other words, it's going to look at the vehicle and it's going to infer make, model, color type. So there is some information that goes beyond the license plate that the system does capture. But data is not collected. There's no names in the system that are aside from the hot list. No registration lookup. It does not hook up to the state of North Dakota DMV. It will not automatically run a license plate. There's no linkage outside of the database. So it is collecting the information and simply comparing it to a hot list that we have.
That
Um,
list is maintained by the PD, correct?
Correct. So that's another important, and I know that's a slide that's coming, but the data belongs to us. It's maintained by us, and that's different from other systems. You've heard on the Flock system that Flock owns the data. In this Axon system, we own the data. So as it says here, data stays in Minot's secure environment, and we decide where it goes. It's not Axon making that decision. What it means. So like I said, Minot Police Department controls the data. Axon does not own or share any of our data, and that's the important thing for you to understand, that it belongs to us. Fleet 3 is not tied to the personal identity, is not tied to personal identity or registration. I mean, we're kind of belaboring this point here, but basically the system will not go outside of what the parameters we set. So who can access the NAT? Only authorized users, and the city council has the final say on who those authorized users are, and how that's used. Right now, like I said, searches require approval of either the chief or the deputy chief. We set the retention period. We can set it any length we wish. At this point, the city council has it set for 10 days. After that point, it gets deleted and that data is gone. And the only way that data is maintained is if it's maintained via a case search where the officer downloads it to an actual case following the parameters of the policy. So this is some information on how, and I'll be honest with you, it's more technical than anything, but it's a US-based Microsoft Azure Database Center. It's encrypted, and it's protected with firewalls, and it has it's at industry standards for protection. I know it's very important to Axon that this data be collected and maintained in a very safe manner. They are actually maintaining all of our digital evidence in their system right now. So everything from pictures of homicides to videos of incidents that occur. Axon is trusted by our agency and has been for many, many years to maintain that data. So, nice thing about it, it's CJIS compliant, it's secure, it requires security clearance to get into it. You have to have passwords and so forth that fit the CJIS requirements. It's audited, and it's tested, and there's monitoring, multi-layer internal department process, and there's an oversight committee, which is what you are. Again, does not track people in real time. It reads license plates only when passed by the camera, and alerts are triggered only by the hot list. There's a hot list based only, no general surveillance. So does not perform person tracking, gait analysis, meaning walking, how a person walks. There's software out there that does not do that. It's not facial recognition. Does not connect to external databases or share data outside of Minot without the parameters that were set in the policy.
So Chief, on that one, on the first bullet here, I understand the live portion being hot list based only, but we are collecting and saving those data pieces for 10 days. So, you know, whether we term that general surveillance or not is really a court question around the Fourth Amendment. But I want to make sure that everybody on the committee understands this and the public does that may watch this, that there are two pieces to this. And we had a long discussion on council about whether the live part of this, which is an alert that I'm sure we'll see in a bit here, an alert is a much different question than 7 days later. Can I go query the database to see what license plates were in an area or where a specific license plate has been? So I want to be a little careful about that first bullet. In my opinion, it is general surveillance. And we are putting general data in a database in case we need it. That's really what the 10 days is all about. So I don't know if you have any comment on that. I mean, again, we're getting into an opinion there and I'll be clear about that, but that is, I want to be careful about that language.
Okay, and to that respect, I mean, obviously I respect your view on that. I do not consider this as individual tracking. It's not something that I can actually go and get unless I have a procedure to do it, unless it fits a certain requirement. So, T, do you want to finish off that? I think that's it, right? So the next one is a video, and this, I'll let T run this video. Like I said, before you hit play on that, T, some of the information, we'll start and I'll tell you afterwards.
ALPR is a state-of-the-art onboard camera system in our patrol vehicles. Not only acts as a typical dash camera with multiple angles, it simultaneously scans license plates as we drive and alerts the officer of any anomalies, which we refer to as a hit. A hit can include many things, such as stolen license plates or vehicles, unlicensed or suspended drivers, and it can also assist the officer in detecting offenders with active warrants, as well as locating victims during an Amber Alert. To avoid being tagged by the ALPR, please ensure that you fulfill your legal obligation to renew and validate your license plate. This will not only prevent you from being issued a ticket, but it'll allow the ALPR to focus on finding suspicious vehicles on our roads, enhancing public safety and disrupting organized auto theft. For more information, please visit fieldpolice.ca/ALPR.
So like I said in that video, it had some info. This is Ontario video, and we just liked it because it gave a quick view of what that system actually looks like, but it's not to our policy. I'm going to have Captain Sunheim step up here and get a little bit more in the weeds in terms of how our system operates. But before I do, Alderman Blessum and any of the community members, do you have any questions for me? Okay.
Make sure I can log in and all that good stuff. Yeah, I think we're. There we go. Okay, so if I do my job correctly, my hope is that I can connect the dots a little bit about some very abstract, high level things like what does this really mean? What does this really look like for officers? So I'm going to take a couple different approaches, but just to maybe add on just one thing, and then we'll let it go about the general surveillance. Just so you know, where we come from, when we say general surveillance from a public safety world, what we mean is that we're not actively just looking at the data. We're not actively watching a video camera. In this case, an ALPR system. We're not just doing general surveillance just to see what we come up with. So from our aspect, when we say that, that's where we come from. Not that your opinion's wrong, but just so you know, that's what our intent is that we're not just watching it, waiting for something to happen. It's intentional in that aspect. So that being said, my idea of today for members of the committee is to take two things. Take the admin side, when we talk about the parameters and the things that we can search, what that looks like. And then from there, get into the officer side and hot lists and the data searches and all those different types of things. So when we talk about all the controls and different things like that, what that looks like and how we can control it. So a couple different things. So when you look at our settings, and it wasn't until today, honestly, that I realized that 10 days was not an option. So I changed it just today at 7 days because As we were going through the process, we turned off as much as we could. We limited as much as we could. So we even have it down to 1 day in case there was something that happened. We knew it was going to go away right away in terms of as we were going through this process. So as I switched it today, which was, I turned it to 7, you can see what it is. But when we talked about the category on that, that slide on the PowerPoint, this is what it comes from. So as you can see, we restricted a lot in order to stay within policy in regards to all the different things. These are all the things that it could be, but taking the direction and the feeling in regards to where we need with the policy, these are all the things that we eliminated in order to stay in accordance with that policy. So as you can see, it could be a lot more. And these are things that, Axon builds in their system that are common maybe in a lot of the communities and gives a kind of broader scope so you can dial that down depending on wherever community you're at. So this is where we're at in regards to it. So as we look at and we get on the user end and it's pulling that information, reasons and different things that it's saving in regards to it, it's going to come from this agency setting, which I'm showing you here. So we always have the ability to expand that, potentially restrict that, whatever the case may be. But that's where we're at in regards to how that list is comprised in order to stay in compliant with the existing policy.
So Justin,
Yep.
with that, can you help me understand how that actually gets implemented? Maybe you're going to get there, but so I understand that these are the types of cases. Does that mean when you go to do a search, that it's only these case types that can get attached to a search? Is that the way to think of that?
This probably more along the lines of the hot list. So this is more along the lines of the hot list.
Okay.
I have to have one of these cases to establish my hot list. So it's more applicable on that side. You will see if I do a data search that you do still have to pick one of these categories, but that necessarily is just kind of formulating that. So this is more on the hot list requirement to put something in. Yep.
I noticed that when you were going through that, I thought I saw warrants kind of down, it was down towards
Yeah.
the bottom, that was not checked. And that sort of surprises me, I
Yeah,
guess.
well, and the reason is because we have different, and you're right, I kind of struggle with that too as we get into it. The reason I left that out was because here's felony warrant. So it restricted it even more. Warrant is kind of general.
Okay,
So I
all right,
think that you could
understood.
probably make an argument that you could put misdemeanor warrants or civil warrants or
Yep.
something like that. So
Okay.
we left it as a felony as a way
You-
to
you-
restrict
yeah,
it. a
you
little
don't,
bit.
want speeding tickets or something
Right,
in there.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
whatever.
If I might, my only question with clarity on that was I saw that stalking was checked, but harassment wasn't. Is there enough of a difference between the two to justify the stalking over the
Stalking
harassment?
is generally a higher level offense.
Okay.
Yep,
Makes
stalking
sense.
at a minimum starts, that's probably the only one that's on there that's a misdemeanor. But there is a felony level to that on secondary offenses type of
Okay.
thing. And with the nature of it, harassment could be, I'm texting a member of the committee more than I need to be, but stalking obviously is this level, right?
That's
So
fair.
it's more of an intimidation level offense. Yep, it's a good question though, thank you. Any other questions on the categories list or any thoughts on any of that?
Mike?
I noticed parole wasn't checked. I realize that's a status, but is that intended to mean for parole violators or wanted persons on parole or just?
You know, I don't know because it's an Axon generated list. I suppose you could use it for somebody that is on parole. I suppose you could do that to figure that out. I suppose you could take a parole list and make that as part of the.
I would hate to think that just that status would be a reason, but if obviously they're wanted, that's a different story.
True, that's correct. And hopefully that's where the active warrants portion would come. And that's kind of the same approach with sex offender. It's an option, right? But that in itself is not on there.
Thank you.
And even and so we get into NCIC hot list uploads, as you can see, this is the NCIC. So even as it's automatically uploading the NCIC, we do have some control in regards to what that is. So as you can see, even from the NCIC status, we have limited to make sure that we are in conjunction with what our custom created hot list might look like. I know I don't got to tell you that technology sometimes fails. So when Deputy Chief Plessis had mentioned the public transparency portal, this is what he's referring to. This is something we can set up, and it's something that a lot of communities do set up. So if we want to give a little bit more insight to how many plates are being read, how many cars are being used and things like this, this is something that we can set up. So we look at policy and usage. So this is basically the settings that a public portal could see. Before I get into it, right now they are all checked. We could restrict that if we wanted to. We could say, okay, we only want the community to see these things, or whatever the case may be. But as you can see, they're very, very general. So as of right now, just as an example, that's what we can see. So as you can see, this would be congruent with whatever our policy is in the record retention. As of right now, it's 7, because like I said, I can't set it for 10 right now without working with Axon. Earlier today, I activated one vehicle, which was one of our sergeant's vehicles, and he's not working actually. But he's been involved with the policy development and he has been trained, so he understands that. So I wanted to make sure we had something that we could give some parameters and give you some insight in regards to it. Otherwise, we'd be looking at a blank screen. So that is the only one that was activated. And since then, actually, it has been turned off, but it takes 24 hours to actually turn up on the backside. So as you can see in a little bit, it read 67 plates in some way. The way the system works is that it will read a plate that crosses in front of it, much like the deputy chief says. If you can see it, in theory, it will pick it up. If you take that freeze frame in that moment of time on Broadway, all those different types of things. If it is obstructed in any way with a bunch of snow, whatever the case may be, it's too dark because their license plate light is out. It's not magic. It's not going to pick those things up. So in theory, if a camera can pick it up, that's what it's kind of picking up. And I'll get into a little bit about, it even refines it within that. That's a very high level overview of, in theory, how many plates have been read. This goes back to the same hot list categories. It would reiterate the things that we checked on that other page. So it would let the public know these are the things that we use it for in regards to the different alerts and different things like that. We can set that up. We can also set up, I believe that we can work with them and we can put our policy on there. So the public will know what our policy is. There's a number of different things that we probably can put on there. But as far as pulling data from the system, we probably be limited to this as far as it being just automatically integrated to a public portal. Any questions on that at all? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so this is tough to say because we haven't started one, but this is records management. This is where we create it. We would manage the records, delete all these different types of things. So if we had, let's just say 5 different hot lists for whatever reason, it could be anything from, we have a high value warrant, somebody's wanted for aggravated domestic, whatever the case may be. Maybe we categorize those all together, or maybe it's just a single vehicle. This is where it would be, and this is where you would manage it on the administrative side as well. It would list all those. Same with the files. And so right now you can see that right now NCIC is the only one that is defaulted in. And so those are the ones that if we were to, when the sergeant was driving today, when he went home, these are the only things that in theory would have been popped up on the backside in regards to a hot list read would be those NCIC hits as well.
So Justin, with that, did I remember that right? When you were on the hot list, the NCIC is coming from that bottom section and you still turn on and off what types of NCIC hits are hit. Is that right?
Yeah, we have some control over that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. At least a few of the categories were on and off.
Yeah. And I guess, you could dive even farther in the weeds in regards to NCIC also has another set of restrictions. You can't, if we're an agency, we want something NCIC. And for those of you maybe not aware, that's the National Crime Information Center. I'll use Deputy Chief behind me. He's an easy target, but I run the Deputy Chief's name. It's going to find out if he's wanted in any 50 states, if that home agency has entered it in for whatever reason. But it also has to meet certain requirements to just do that. Same with stolen vehicles and different things like that. You can't just enter whatever because that's an FBI controlled database. And so what that's doing is that it's allowing us to control at least some aspects to it. Because if I was to run somebody and it very well might show that they're on probation, it might show that they are on the sex offender list. But as you can see, we unchecked those. And so in theory, it should not be pulling that off of an NCIC hit because we have that control.
And so just to kind of go back to something I think I said during council, I can get closer on this side of the system, right? The idea that a hot list is going to tell me faster than I can type it into something, to me makes a lot more sense. I really run into heartburn when we get into storing data. That's a different question. This makes more sense to me because it's the same thing that an officer's eyes are doing, and whether they're using a computer or whatever that is. I think that makes sense. So then the big thing though is we have a whole set of procedures. If let's say you come across someone that's on the NCIC list from Detroit, let's say, that there's a whole set of procedures of what you would go through at that point anyway, whether this system is on and tells you that, or when you've pulled them over and you get something back, whether it's from dispatch or from the system, right? That's all already covered under normal policy. Correct? Okay.
Correct. Yep. Yep. There's different staggers and different entries and requirements to get there. So how these things will mesh as I get into the data side, which is the retention side, the investigation side, how these things mesh a little bit, right? And I'll use, and I think it was Officer Harrington that started to kind of approach that at the council meetings, is that in theory, yes. In theory, we use the very easy example. If I pull a car over, it's going to give me a hit. I'm going to know what it is. And absolutely, that's our priority. That's what we really, really want to know. But all these things, no matter if it is, and we'll get into, is officer verification at the end of the day. Because once again, it is just technology. We don't want the computer or the system making decisions for us. It is all officer judgment as a result based of that. So I could be driving down Broadway and my system, because it's scanning things as I'm working, right? And as we've all driven on Broadway, I might pass 10 cars in about 6 seconds, right? I might be pulling over somebody at the same time. Didn't mean to point at you, Mike, committee member Mike, but I might be pulling somebody at the same time and I'm getting a hit. I need to verify that's actually a car that it hit on, because it actually could be the car that drove by. Or I might be responding to that emergency call and I get a hit as I'm responding. I can't deal with it then, but I need to be able to, an officer, and be able to, that's where detention becomes, be able to go back and look at, okay, this is what actually hit. It actually was somebody that is suspected of homicide out of Detroit, whatever the case may be, or it is somebody that's local, that is a local hot list of a felony, aggravated domestic, and those different types of things. So there's kind of 2 different levels in regards to where those hot lists might happen. In real time, we want those things to absolutely happen as those officers pull people over, but there is that aspect of it might be something as I was dealing with something else or was distracted with something else, and I have to go back and do just a little bit of investigation, figure out why it hit, where it hit, and what it was, type of thing. So here's where you would upload the hot list, and we kind of explain that a little bit. So now here's we talk about the data side, right? And so this is exactly what it would look like in terms of somebody searching the system for something. It's correlating with that 10-day retention period. So it's only going to be able to pull information off of that. So we talk about search reason. That's the biggest thing. And as you can see, anything with the asterisk, that is absolutely required before you can even access the system. There's a number, and I'm going to be careful based upon the conversations that we had in regards to still trying to determine what is public and what's not. So I mean, very, very diligent in when I run a search here and what that is. But here you would, if you knew a plate number, you can put a plate number in. If you knew a partial, you can put a partial in. It's good. The system's going to do its best it can to match all those things. You can obviously scale that down between date. And here's where those categories that we talked about a little bit is over here it fits in one of those categories, or if that's what it's about. The owner is not vehicle owner. That is the owner of the camera or the vehicle that was being driven by the officer. So in this case, what you're probably going to see is Sergeant Washington. And so it is the person that was the owner, because everything we do in the system is automatic. There's nothing that I've done in here that hasn't been tracked by the system. It sees exactly what I have ran and what I have done and what I've accessed. And so, and it attaches as me as an owner. And so what that is that if I knew that a certain officer was, driving around. So we talked about those things, that if there's an issue in regards to something, let's just say for whatever reason, let's play that side of it. If somebody is suspected of misusing it, I could run just that person's LPR if I needed to on an audit trail, whatever the case may be. So you can really dissect it, narrow a lot of things down. Or if I believe, or if Sergeant Washington believed that he is the one that drove past that suspect, let's look at just his data. And so we can tailor that down a little bit so we're not getting results that is very wide, reaching unnecessarily. Vehicle, as you can see, see now it's going to yell at me. I'm going to do this just to start. So vehicle, that is the owner vehicle. So as you can see, that's our number. That's not the vehicle itself. Hit read category, all records, red records, hit records. So you could separate it just on hits if you wanted to, and that's where the other side, where the hot list kind of starts meshing together with this side. Hot list, same thing. If I suspect it's on a certain hot list, I certainly can do that. If I knew what the plate state was, I could separate that as well. Vehicle body, pretty specific, or I shouldn't say specific, but very specific in regards to type, van, bus, if we thought it was something like that. I didn't know golf cart was on there before, but golf cart evidently is an option in regards to that. Same thing, vehicle make, vehicle color, and if I knew the plate type, you could definitely do that. So what I'm going to do is when he ran it, I know that it picked up one of our license plates, so I'll show you on that side what would happen. So before I do that though, any questions on the search options that are there for the system?
So one, Justin, so one of the things that I think we had talked about was that there's a case required. So I don't see a field for a case. Certainly you could put that into reason, right? Is that going to be department policy that a case is put in there? Is that
Correct.
Okay.
That's where the case number will be attached to that as well.
okay?
Correct.
A second question, then I also don't see anything, and again, this could be limitations in their system, and we've written a policy, we've already seen that with the days, right? Where it's slightly outside of how they've got it laid out. How do you guys intend to track approvals from the chief and deputy chief? Because I don't see any approval levels here. We know that the person running it is being tracked because they're logged in, right? So how do we track approvals?
There is no way within the system to do that. And I'm going to be 100% honest with the committee, is that the policy that was created is a little outside of how the system was intended to be used. And so it is intended to be used in regards to the user end being able to use the system. So as we look at that, if I'm an officer on the road, the system is built in order to restrict when and how I can search. The system is supposed to do that based on the parameters. It's not built upon 3 outside kind of levels to do those approvals. I'll use an example of is that we had a case here a couple years ago, and it's probably, and I'll use this extreme of a case, but it's probably as close to an active threat type situation in the city mine that we dealt with. There was somebody's actively shooting on the north side of town. Next thing they know, they get descriptions and different things like that, and that person is pulling a gun on the south side of town. From an officer's perspective and response perspective of, so we have an uncontrolled active threat within the community, right? And so when you look at that, I get where we're at. We ideally want the lowest level with the parameters that we're at in order to access the system in those high level critical events type of thing. And so we have to understand that based upon the approvals and different things like that, we are going to limit in regards to how we use it and the capacity, what we can use it for type of thing. So going back to your question, Chairman Blessing, I think that, we would have to create a system outside the system to track approvals in regards to that, which yeah, it is what it is. If that's the direction of the committee or the recommendation of the council, but it's creating more hands in the pot. It's creating more room for error because you're doing manual system outside of what is already being audited.
Justin, really for me, the simplest way, if I look at it, the search reason, if it's an empty text field, I mean, you just put JS on there, which I assume is you. I would have no problem whatsoever, and the committee can chime in here. If we had DC after it or C after it, meaning the deputy chief approved it or the chief approved it, it gives me everything I would worry about from a committee standpoint. That's all I'm looking for. I just want, like I said during council, what I really want, I want the two of them to know it, especially as we launch this. That's the key thing to me. I don't think we have to go create something crazy outside because I think we get into spreadsheets, you get into all kinds of crazy stuff. Something simply in the search reason is more than enough for me. Yeah.
Chairman Blessom and the committee. As you look at it, an investigative report is going to be done anyway, whether it's in CAD or whatever. So the approval is going to be put in there somewhere. It's going to say, like you see the search field, they're going to be a case number. Those are the checks and balances that keep these systems honest. And so that's the key to all this is you have to have a search, you have to have a reason for even remotely thinking about going into this. You have to put it in or you can't get into it. And like you said, with our name behind it, but someone's going,
There'd be case notes that
there'll
you
be
were
case notes,
contacted.
right? Those case notes or an investigative note that just says approved by deputy chief or approved by chief or the captain. So
Yeah, so Chief, I guess with respect, I think that's the exact thing that I want to guard against. Because I'm not worried about the big one that we solved and it was a big murder case. That's going to be everywhere, right? Like that one, you're going to be able to attach all the dots. What I'm worried about is the day by day doldrums 3 years from now, where I don't want the random searches going on. I want you to have approved them, or I want Deputy Chief Plessis to approve them because there's a good reason why it happened in the first place and it never turned into anything, but it was still a legitimate search. There was still a reason to do it. I'm not doubting that, but I want it documented so that we know it. And back to the captain's point, if that means that we got to go offline, I'm suggesting let's make it simple. But if you guys do need to go offline, whether we like it or we don't, the council did agree to the parameter. So The chief or the deputy chief needs to have a stamp of approval somewhere on every search. So that's where we sit today.
I'm done.
Okay. And not disagreeing. I mean, that is an option. And I think as we get through this, I'm hoping that we are having obviously honest discussions in regards to what this looks like logistically, because honestly, yes, I'm one of the people that the council had authorized to use the system. And obviously with the approval from the deputy chief and the chief behind me, 100% agreeable in regards to that. I just want to make sure we're looking out for our officers in regards to making sure that not only is it functional, but we're weighing everything like we had mentioned in regards to what are we truly accomplishing at the end of the day is at the end of the day is what we hope to be clear on, I guess, in regards to what those are. So if I was to run this search, this is what I get. So I know that there is one result, and that's the police department. And that's where the one record was ran. It is not a hit. It is just a read. And keep in mind, I'm not what the officer sees. I'm on the administrative side of it because I ran a search that was authorized in regards to it. And so this is what I see. I see that this plate was ran, and this is what the time it was ran, and this is where it was at. Oops. I click on that result, and this is what you would see. And so the system is looking at the plate. As you can see off to the right of that, it spells it out on what it thinks it is. It will give a percentage, and don't ask me how it comes up with the algorithm for the percentage, but it will give a percentage in regards to it is 99.9% sure it's an SUV. It's 89% sure it's a Ford. It's less confident it's black. Maybe it was dirty. Plate state is North Dakota, and it believes it's a regular type plate. So it'll give a percentage of what it feels like is confident in regards to what it sees. So at this point, I've done the search. It matches. I found my suspect, whatever the case may be. That's the one I'm going to use. But I also could have got 5 other results. I could have got 10 other results in regards to that. So when we look at, and I'm just being honest, when we look at logistics of how this system is going to work, in theory, that officer has went to the supervisor and says, I have this case or respond to this case. I want to be able to access our LPR data because I want to further that case. We encourage our officers, and we made a dramatic shift in the past several years in order to empower officers and give them trainings on the front level possible to alleviate some of that pressure from the investigators. So we push them to investigate as far as they possibly can. So it is not beyond the norm that they are going to ask that question or want to do that as well. So at that point, they contact their immediate supervisor. They're probably their sergeant. That sergeant more than likely is either going to direct them to call me, Lieutenant Dyke, or Captain Sunbakken. At that point, I have to get a hold of the deputy chief or the chief. At that point, now I have to figure out how I'm going to access the system. There's 2 ways I can do that. I could do it remotely. I could do it from home. I'm going to tell you why that can be problematic in regards to the case. Or I can come in and I'm working side by side that officer as they're trying to work that case. It is what it is, accessing the system, but all those things take time. And so if I'm going to work side by side with that officer on that case, either I myself or Lieutenant Dyke, Captain Sunbach is interjecting themselves in every single criminal case in some way in that investigation. I'm willing to do that. However, there's only 3 of us and there's only so much of us that go around, especially as you prolong that court process and every single part of it as well. And so the second part to that is I could run that from a remote location. I could run that via the cloud-based system and I can come up with the exact same thing. And maybe it's on the phone. I'm trying to work through it. But the reality is I might have 10 because like I said, the system is not built necessarily to work that way. At least that's our belief. So I could export 10 vehicles because that was the result of my search. And I could send that to the officer and they could sift through it. It's my belief that we're actually going backwards in regards to what the intention is, which is including people that aren't associated with cases to a potential case, because we can't undo that at that point. That becomes part of a case. It becomes part of a case investigation that I forwarded those 10 cases, those 12 cases, and all these different things that were associated with that into actual evidence for that officer now to determine what is it that I'm really doing, because that officer is not the one that's running the search. So we have to take the system, take those results, and then give it to an officer. And now they have to do what they would have been doing in front of me. I just want to agree to disagree, but I just want to be completely transparent in regards that that's the reality of how it will potentially work. And so at that point, you convert that to evidence because I found my person. And now you go through the exact same thing in regards to placing that into a evidence file, because that's what I believe. And that's what I'm going to use in terms of the case itself. I might run a search and I'm investigating and none of that makes any sense. None of it matches, not what I'm looking for, all those different types of things, then I'm not pushing that over to a case. I'm letting it be. It was a search. It's nothing that of instance to me. It's off over here because I'm not actually putting it over to a criminal case. Just so everybody knows, when those go push over as evidence, now there's a different retention. Those then will fall under the different retention requirements in terms of the level of case, felony case, all those different types of things. Once it leaves this system and goes over there. So that being said, this is what I see on my side. Before I get into what an officer sees on an everyday level, any questions on this?
When you're running that search, the map below, does that dictate where you're searching? I mean, can you draw or zoom to a specific location and it's only going to look at that location?
It should. That's the part that I experiment a little bit more, but you should be able, yeah, you can draw boundaries or whatever the case may be, or you can go in and you can even tailor it even more. Just like from a certain car running it, you can also tailor it to a certain area to run it as well. Just so you're trying to sift out stuff that you know isn't important. Correct. And this is showing and it's more in the metadata, but obviously you can tell where it is. It's showing on a general map, but it's not necessarily given immediate location of where that was. And like I think we talked about in one of the council meetings, the metadata that's there, it's actually where the ALPR system is. It's not where the vehicle is, even though it's reasonable to believe that they're both obviously in the same place.
Justin, can you scroll down a little bit on there again? That one thing I thought was interesting, the capture date is giving a little window.
Sure.
Do you know why that is? Why it's not an actual stamp?
I think because,
Or is it maybe multiples at the exact same spot?
yeah, I click on the right one. I think it actually hit the same plate a couple times as it's
Right.
backing up.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep. But yeah, it's going to pick, I'm not sure how it picks. I think it picks the first one and that's the result it shows. Yep.
Every now and then I'm gonna be interjecting, so sorry. But real quick, I wanted to make sure that you understood too. The captain was explaining how each of our officers are, they handle different investigations. And some of you members of the council know I've sent every single officer through the BCI on our department through the BCI basic criminal investigations course so that they can take cases from beginning to end. So we've expanded our investigations division is what we're trying to do. So all the lower level crimes, whatnot, we're asking them to go from beginning to end. So that's what he's referring to when he's saying that we're encouraging all of our officers. We're training them. They're overseen by the investigative division, but we're training all of them to take it from here, from on site to completion. So that's my last of my 2 cents, I promised. Got anything?
Right?
I won't hold you to your last 2 cents, Chief.
That's
Okay, okay, that's fair. All right, any questions on the search itself from going back in the data side from the investigation portion?
Just an observation. Sounds like you're going to spend a lot of time in court.
Potentially.
Like there's not enough of you. With the potential number of cases that could be generated, if you're the one guy, you're going to be in court a lot.
Well, between myself, Lieutenant Dyke, and Captain Sunbakken, yeah, you're correct. The way that court proceedings work, I might not have to show a preliminary hearing or suppression hearings or things like that, but that's a possibility. But when it gets to an actual jury trial, when it gets to actual trial, they're going to bring in everybody that was associated with that case in some capacity.
Right.
And just to clarify that, that's because the officer who runs the search is the person who needs to testify. Is that the right way to think of that?
That's right.
Correct. I'm the one that actually accessed that initial piece of evidence that has turned it over to an officer.
Unless they stipulate to it, they're not going to.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine in regards to how some of the attorneys operate. So
So, and Justin, one other question with this end. So I assume this is another spot where we're a little bit outside of how Axon envisioned this. I work a lot with software. I understand kind of where they're coming from, right? So, you know, the way that we've thought of it, I think throughout is that every search should be tied to a case, right? So I'm expecting a drop down of cases, kind of like it is when you go to attach it as evidence, like it's actually a case then, right? Or it's attached to a case. I was expecting that here. My assumption is they just didn't envision that. So they didn't really have a way to attach the case at the search level. Is that the right way to think of it?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
I think that at the end of the day, because that case in system isn't built until it's built. And what I mean by that is everything digital has for us associated with Axon, our body cam, our camera, our digital photos, our fleet camera, just in itself, the video, everything is there until it's built into a case. So until that happens on the backside, basically it's the same thing with this search, right? On the backside, our digital evidence technician, she builds the case and pulls that all together at one point. And so you would save that, you attach it as a piece of evidence, and at that point, it becomes a case with 17 different pieces of evidence associated with that, if that makes sense. So it becomes a case as you pull the evidence together, and then you build it over here.
Okay, so then am I right to think that it's not correct that we will have a case for every search?
You will have a.
You'll have a reason for a search,
You will
but you
have.
won't necessarily have a case?
You will have an incident. At the very minimum, you will have an incident, which I want to be very clear on the difference between an incident and a case. Every single thing we do has an incident is documented. From the time it comes into dispatch, it's assigned an incident number. From there, as that investigation keeps going, it may turn into a case. I can tell you right now that the likelihood of this being a case is very, very high. But if you want me to give you 100% guarantee that every single incident is going to turn into a case, I'm not quite sure, because I'm not quite sure that I can predict that future in regards to it. And the reason I say that is that if we have a shots fired call in regards to Northwest Minot, our officers potentially verify in some capacity of a suspect, whatever the case may be, we still probably could pull a general case as documentation. Don't get me wrong. We probably can always do that. But there are so many different nuances in regards to where an incident becomes a case. It's still all documented the same way. It's still all tied to the initial number. It's still all tied to a number in regards to that.
So and my only trepidation here, and and this committee will be going through some of this stuff, but we got to be really clear about the nomenclature we're using for our discussions. So my recollection is we went through this as a council, and even before it was actually in front of us as a council, was that it was all going to be tied to a case. Now I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt that we were generalizing a little just to make the discussion easy enough to have, because it's complicated. I get that. But I think as we continue forward, and now we've got 5 individuals that have committed to putting time into this and working with you to get this as good as we can for the community. Now we got to get really clear about what we're saying. So when we do a search reason, we're at least going to understand the incident this is tied to. Is that the right way to put it?
It is. And those
Okay.
numbers match each other.
Sure.
So that number stays the same. And don't get me wrong, we can always build it. We can always generate a case, because it is going to fall under the suspicion of any of those categories that we had. We can always do that.
Yeah.
I'm just being a little bit cognizant of the fact that, are we creating more work on ourselves just because? So that's what I'm getting to.
And I think, I appreciate very much that you're being honest and just talking through these nuances, right? Because to me, they matter an awful lot. And one thing I'll just say quick, to be honest with you, I'm not all that sympathetic on the extra work. You guys are asking for this, right? You want the tool, chief, as you've said. So if you want the tool and you want to use it, if it requires the work, it's going to require the work. I mean, that's how this works. So as long as we've got that traceability. So is it right to think of an incident being promoted to a case? Is that sort of the idea?
Correct. And
Okay,
I think,
perfect.
and kind of what you're saying too, is that I might do a search on an incident, and I might be investigating something underneath that parameters, but it might not get to that case level. Where on the backside, like I said, you're building all those other things and making a case. And so, like I said, I'm kind of in the weeds in regards to a records management system.
Yep.
I get it. And we can get to that compromise or understanding of what that looks like as well. But some of that is a little bit, I don't say semantics, but everything is an incident number and or a case at a minimum.
Yep.
So you need something. Basically what that's doing is preventing the officer from not having something documented, right?
Exactly. Yep. And that's what, again, to me, it's a little bit interesting that this search for our use and the way that we've laid things out, when I see a search reason that's our key way of attaching to something, that's not a drop down or even an ID that we're entering, those are not actually linked. So now what we're doing is we're making that inference about what the link is. That's a little problematic to me. And that's a database issue. That's an Axon question, really, more than anything else, because we're counting on that being tied back somehow because it's not here unless it gets promoted into a case. And so that, again, we're in the weeds, and I appreciate that is where we're at, but we're going to get into a discussion here, I think, in a little bit where we talk about what is the committee going to be even able to see, which is a little problematic to me, where if we can't actually, here we can see one example search because you pulled an actual police vehicle. If these aren't open records, we can't look at any other search, not one, the way I take it. So I don't know if that means that, I guess from my perspective, I want a member of council read in and be able to see actual searches. I don't know if we can do that privately. I don't know how we go about that. If this committee can't do it, then I don't know what we're doing exactly, to be honest with you. So we'll have to see where that takes us down the road, but I can see the city attorney. Thank you, Steph.
So, Chair Blossom, members of the committee. So council members do have access to confidential information. There's a provision under state law that allows for that. I don't know if that translates over to the CJIS permissions. So that'd be something we'd have to go back and look at
I
to
did some
see.
research.
Okay. Deputy
Yeah, so I
Chief.
did do some research and the state does not believe that would work for CJIS. So we would have some work to figure out. There are other options. One of the things that they had indicated that if it's an employee of the city, someone who's employed with the city, such as the auditor, that person could receive CJIS credentials and audit, but there are certain rules that they'd have to follow. So from their perspective, unless they're actually employed by our agency,
Which we
We would
are,
not.
right? I got a W-2 from the city of Minot. So I'm a W-2 employee
I
of the
guess
city.
that's gonna come to, in their view, it was a no, but I guess that would be more of a legal question.
Sure.
Their contract, Chairman Blossom, members of the council, and see how they're defining an employee. Under the CJIS rules, if that looks different than public official, but yeah, they do receive a W-2, they receive a
I have a
payment
badge, I
fee
have
every month.
everything else. Yeah,
Exactly. Homework for us to look into.
perfect.
About the only other thing that I had was what an officer would see. So this is actually what an officer would see. So if you look at the far left, it has hits and all reads. So it's actually pulling up the one thing that I just pulled up. So that's the only thing an officer would see without going into a search. So it is showing what it's running throughout the day. But as you can see, the only thing that is showing is a license plate. And the only thing that the system is asking, hey, is that plate correct or not? And it would say correct or not. Obviously, if there's a hit, it would take up the next thing and it would confirm it. So you can see on this side, there's a lot less information versus an actual search because those are live reads at the end of the day.
So they're not going to verify every hit, right? So,
Well, every hit they would, but every
every hit,
every
right? I'm
plate-
sorry, every read
Correct.
is what I meant. Yeah. So because like you said, they're driving up Broadway, they got 10 in 10 seconds. They're not going to verify all those hits. But whether they pull someone over or they get a hit, because again, the idea is here, if it's a hit, but it's super dirty and looking at it visually with my eyes, like I know it's not the right one, we're going to say no, right? And it's not going to continue. So the idea would be hits would need to be verified if they're going to be used immediately, or do you want them to verify every hit? Because the question I go to is the one that you propose, which is, hey, I'm headed across town on a call, but I get a hit as I'm driving up Broadway. Without verifying that, I'm wondering whether that's useful if you don't go verify it right away. Can we even use that in court if you don't verify it?
Yeah. So when we talk about verifying, let's use this example. This is what it's asking. This is what the verification looks like. What it really is doing is this one's right on, right?
Yep.
But what it's doing on the right there, it's giving, okay, I think it's POLICE, right? I think it's North Dakota. I think it's those things. So when we talk about verifying, you're going to see that exact same thing and verify it that way, right? And you're going to see the snapshot of the vehicle. And so at that point, you would go back and verify that hit, look at this information, because at that point it's a hit, right? And you would say, okay, no, that is an actual hit, or that doesn't appear to be the case. And that point, you are still going to verify through dispatch. Is this still an active thing? Because sometimes in NCIC things get discarded and all those different types of things. So when it's asking to verify, it's giving you this type of information. Verify the state, verify the actual numbers, the phonetic numbers, and different things like that. If that makes sense, that's what's asking for verification.
When
for.
we're talking verification, that's before you stop the vehicle. If it's,
Or continue an investigation into that vehicle. Correct.
So when we're thinking of verification, it's not a matter of me looking at the vehicle to verify that the snapshot was even the right car. It's using this record to verify the left against the right. Is that the best way to think of that? Because again, if you crossed on Broadway, you're not going to be able to verify a darn thing. That car's in the wind. I mean, unless you're going to turn around and go chase it.
Correct.
You're
So-
verifying the picture.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So if you imagine this picture, if he was actually moving, right, and they're going the opposite way, it would do this exact same thing and snap it. And it would say, okay, this with this much certainty, like I said, is what the system believes it is. So, right. And you're using your officer judgment
Oh, yeah.
based on the information that's put in front of you of how accurate is that. Correct.
And so, because as I thought of verification as, yes, I can also see it with my eyes, that is correct. And I just want to make sure we're clarifying that. It's not that. So in the scenario where you are going across town to a call and this does blip, you can visually say, yes, I think that's right. You can let dispatch know, hey, this vehicle, I just hit on this vehicle. It's headed the other direction here.
Right.
One other question along those lines then is this only happening in this vehicle? Or is dispatch, if a hit comes, do they get an alert somehow? Does anyone else get any kind of alert?
The only alerts is when we talk about those hot lists, you can customize who's getting those hot lists alert. So at that point, yes, in this vehicle, they're going to be getting a hot list hit in regards to it because that system is hitting. I have to do a little bit more research is that I don't know that the entire fleet gets a hit because as you can see, there's different ways to snooze different things. Once again, this is based on potentially a very large system, a very large LPR system with a large fleet type of thing. So that camera or that system would get an alert. If it's a custom alert, then whoever's attached to being notified of that would be alerted as well in some capacity. But dispatch is not running our system, so they would not get an alert.
I would look at it, to me, I would say there's two phases to this. There's the real time. And then there's, somebody calls in a crime 6 hours after it's happened. Now it's an investigative tool to see what might have, transpired in that neighborhood.
Correct. Yep, absolutely correct. So in this case, if we use this example again, you could have a suspect that said it was a black SUV. I've narrowed my search, and as a result of my search or time frame, description of the car, or even license plate, it would give me this result based upon all those different criteria to be able to go back and look at, hey, either this is my one person or I get that list of 10. But based upon what that list is, I really need to hone in on this one because officer judgment today still comes in. I still need to hone in on this one. This is who I'm going to focus my investigation on based upon all the facts that I have in front of me. And it's at that point, even if I attend it, really at the end of the day, it's a process of elimination, just like any other investigation is.
Just off of the top of your head based on calls for service in the last 10 days, how often would you say this would have been useful?
It's
in the investigative.
Correct.
Based on a hot list you might have, but based on the second part of to help solve something that may have happened.
It's hard. And I remember all of us have asked that question. It's really difficult. You can see the amount of plates that it would read, and that's just one off a very short time. So it's going to, in all transparent, it is going to read a lot in some way, but we're going to have to sift through those and what actually is useful. I can foresee us looking at a couple times a day to maybe there is a couple days without needing it, without wanting to access it, all those different types of things. my job is, as the commander, is not to let our officers get discouraged because of any hurdles that might be in part of that system. And so we want them to be able to use that system or be able to come up with that additional piece of evidence and utilize the system to tighten up whatever case they might need.
And as far as if it's a hot list hit, they're not really gonna have to access this. They're just gonna have to verify that the match to an NCIC hit or a local warrant hit or what
Yeah,
the case may be.
That's where the retention kind of mixes a little bit with the hot list because it is holding that, if you remember, we went back to, the admin settings. So you could set retention for two different things, right? Hit retention, read retention. So hit retention, we could set that at a different amount. You could set your read as a different amount. So that's where the two are, we have them the same, but that's where they kind of combine.
And actually, I think that might be one thing because we didn't talk about a difference between those two at the council level. So that might be something that this committee could take up to say, look, we are comfortable making a recommendation to council that the hit retention needs to be different. To me, once that data is pushed into a case, it's outside of all of this anyway. Correct? That's a whole different layer of how the data is being used in the investigative process. So this is simply saying in the database, there's reads, there's hits. How long can those be? Because maybe hits are more useful for longer, right? It's different once it becomes evidence and it's pushed into a case, it's already under all different retention rules anyway.
The things that, and I think as chief, and I remember as we were talking to the council meeting, is that we want to be cognizant of is that we come across a lot of delayed reporting for a lot of different reasons. And so that's where I remember the compromise was the 10 days is that what we don't want is we have sexual assaults, a violent sexual assault that happens on a Friday night. It's very, very common that they're not reported until the next week. And now we're up against the wall in regards to trying to get some of that information type of thing. So we're trying to make sure that we're very cognizant of all the things and the moving things that we're talking about, because we also understand that that information is, and not only that, it might be reported right away. We have violent crime, we have a homicide that happens, but it's not until 4 days later where we talk to the right witness that says, well, it was a black SUV. Well, now we're 4 or 5 days into the investigation. So, I mean, some of those things happen as the investigation occurs, and you don't have a lot of information until the front end of it might occur as well. So, I think it's all about perspective of how you look at the two, and you could probably make an argument for one or the other of having more value, honestly.
Yep. Well, and I've said throughout, I don't doubt for 1 second how valuable this is for investigative work. That, don't get me wrong. Okay. I understand that fully. The thing that I always come back to is we make trade-offs every single day in this country about where freedom ends and safety starts. And this is one of those lines that we're moving one direction at this point. And so I just want to make sure that as we're doing that we're cognizant that we're making that choice, because we are giving up some privacy. We are giving up some anonymity in our day to make sure that we have the investigative tools that our department wants. And so, because the thing that I look at when I look at, for what you just described, where it's a late reporting of a sexual assault, let's say, that's a read retention question. Because, I mean, unless that person actually had a hit for some reason, they're wanted for something else, that's a read retention question. If we just got to know if he was in the area during that time, that's a regular read retention question. And we've already set that at 10. So I understand a case could be made. Why not make it 365 days, right? From an investigative standpoint, I think that's what we would all want, because you'd want the data. But we're doing trade-offs here. We're trading privacy and freedom for safety. And right now, the council has decided that that's at 10 days, and we'll see how that adjusts as time goes by. So, one of the things that I want to make sure of is that we get to so let's do this, and whichever one of you wants to finish with that. Justin, am I cutting off anything that you wanted to finish with?
The only thing I was going to make sure is you understand the system, because I don't think we've covered in any way that how the actual in-car Fleet 3 system works, right? We talk a lot about ALPR because it's built in within the system, and you see the snapshot in regards to that. Just so everybody understands, our cameras are recording all the time, basically, because there's a buffering aspect to it. And that's partly why how the system works. So when our officers get in an accident or they make that traffic stop, it goes back X amount of time. In our case, it's 30 seconds. So in reality, our cameras are always running in some capacity. So there's context to where this system isn't necessarily operating outside. It's just using that time, using that background running all the time. And that's how we get to where we are. just so everybody understands.
So when we talked about, where you went to one vehicle and turned it on today, what you were turning on was the actual recognition, the reading, the database parts of it. The camera itself was already running because we're using that in other capacities.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, we can control that to some extent. It took a lot of manipulation, but we can control that to some extent per vehicle as well.
Okay, great. Okay, any other questions on the presentation that the team put together?
Who, when it comes to the hot list, who will be able to add? So like, everybody's kind of out, but something goes on. So my guess, I mean, I'm assuming that within this system, only certain people can inquire, like yourself.
Correct.
However, maybe the shift commander can say, I need to add this plate to the hot list.
Yeah, I don't think we specifically address that within the policy, but based on the intent of the policy and based on the parameters and the limitations of who's accessing the system from that level, it's reasonable to believe that it's going to be the same people that can access the system are the only ones that can enter hot lists.
I mean, there could be something where time might be of the essence, or a crime happens in Newtown and they call up and say, we think this fella's headed to Minot and this is the vehicle he's in.
Correct. So silver alerts, amber alerts, those are very low hanging fruit in regards to some of those things. In regards to, we might be able to enter that into our system faster than what the state can necessarily do in regards to a missing person, because those things take time. So we have missing person as part of our parameters. This is that we potentially could enter that in a lot quicker than those state alerts come out in regards to that.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, guys. So what I want to do now, we're down to the policy review. I think we've hit on that, and the deputy chief went through some of the adjustments. I think in our next meeting, I'm hopeful that we can get to an updated policy so we can work from that and make sure that we've got that in front of us. So hopefully we'll be headed there. One of the things I want to make sure of then is that we understand a little bit of what the committee is going to be able to do, because to be honest with you, I don't want to rehash this discussion every time. I'll say my piece as we go, but the point of this is to say, is it being used according to the policy? And what I'm hearing so far is we'll have no visibility to whether it is. So I need to understand that a little bit, because if this committee is not going to be able to do that, then I've got to take a different approach, and I'll do that through council.
Chairman Blesseman, members of the committee, I think that there is some work to determine whether a council member could be part of that. I can tell you just a community member cannot be. They would have to be employed. In terms of employment, when I was asking the question, I don't know if they were considering a alderman employed by the city, but I certainly wasn't. So I have to look at that a little bit closer. There might be a route to where an alderman could be a part of that review process. But there is also outside employees of the outside department employees, such as what we had initially recommended, which was an auditor from the finance department. I mean, those are also options, and they could report in terms of what kind of searches are being done and so forth. You are correct that we cannot publicly share case information for obvious reasons.
So, and just to be clear, the other side of this, I'll voice where I'm at most of the time. The other side of this is that trade-off I'm talking about. If we are trading it, I really want to see success, right? Like, we've nabbed some really bad guys because we turned this thing on and took away a bunch of freedoms. That trade-off needs to occur. I think most people would agree that the trade-offs both after 9/11, but also during COVID, we maybe didn't get the public good from the trade-offs that we gave. When we had a governor telling everybody to shut down your business, you can't cut hair and provide for your family, I don't think we got the public good that should have come from that level of decision. To me, these are parallels. We're making a decision to give something up to get something. And I think the public deserves to know what they're getting for what they're giving up. And so I don't know how we go about that. And again, I don't want to paint a rosy picture. I want to know if something doesn't go the way we thought, if a policy doesn't work exactly right, I want to know that. But I do want to understand, wow, we got this guy because we put this in place. I think that's an important part of this whole puzzle. And I would hope you guys would want to not that we go out and put out a big, great Facebook post and all that stuff. That's not my point. But if that's the successes we're expecting, and we've been kind of painted a picture of some of those, boy, I hope we see them.
Yeah.
At least some of us get to see those so we understand what we're getting for not only what we're paying for, which is where my mind usually goes, but also what we're giving up to get it.
Chairman Blessing, once an arrest is made, I would agree that that information then can become public and should come to this committee. You should know what the results of that are. And I believe in terms of your previous statement that community standards, it's exactly what you guys are here for. So whether we're not the ones who decide community standards, you are. So, and we're cognizant of that.
So with that in mind, and I'll pose this to the chief, Justin, any of you that are here, what you understand what I guess what I want from this, which is I want oversight. I want to see and feel assured that we're at least the policy we've established is being followed and that we make adjustments to it. What can this committee do to work with you to do that? Because we're not going to have the data. So how do we function?
Chairman, bless them, and the council. Some of the things that you can do for us in this is start to help us to allow, and I know that we have it voted on in the council, but when you're starting to look at just the captain able to pull the information, that doesn't allow for the type of things that you're looking for because now the delays are so long. What we're going to do is that's what I was talking to the city attorney about. We're going to look at what does it mean maybe for a council member to be able to sit there and see what's behind the curtain. And maybe that's through an MOU or through something with CGIS. We don't know that yet. That's what I was talking to her about because we have other MOUs with different types of entities where we can share information back and forth. So those are some of the things that we can start to look at. Can our street lieutenant or the lieutenant that's backing up the captain, because the way my system works on the police department, there's a backup to those captains, and that's their specific lieutenant that fills in for them when they're leaving, when they're out of town or something. So those are the things that will help us in this.
Justin?
That's just to also hit on it. We actually had that exact conversation this morning is that how do we paint the picture that this is actually a useful tool and it's just not just out there, right? We actually had that discussion this morning of success stories. I think where maybe the disconnect is what we're trying to establish is the difference between, we talk about something external, right? Where we can track that and we can say, okay, there was these cases, it was used some capacity. It was 20 cases this past month where it played a factor. I think where we're kind of saying pause, we don't know what that looks like is that when letting the actual committee be in the system and see what the searches are, because a lot of the same reasons, which actually is really parallel to you, is regards to that information. Like we also are very, very cognizant of that. So getting in the system and seeing the actual search and all the plates that were ran and those different types of things, because I think we're on the same page in regards to, we want to share those success stories of it was these 25 cases in this past month or 10, whatever the case may be. I think it's where we're being really, cautious is that how much detail within that, right? The plate, the person, all those different types of things. Once the case is done, that's one thing. But I think we got in very much the same mode in regards to we want to have on a very generalized standpoint. This is what the rate is. This is what has been used because you know what? If it's 1 in 6 months, I agree with you. It ain't worth it, right? In regards to some of those things. And so we want to be able to show, no, this is why it was important to us. And this is why we feel it's important to the community. So I think we share that sentiment.
Right. And so Steph, is there a redaction method that could be used here? Is there something that would say, look, we can't see the plate itself, but we see the list of searches. We see the type of case, not the case itself. Like, again, I think that to get the level of transparency that I'm looking for, because you know what, I'm perfectly happy to be a part of a team if we can work through that legal issue that does it internally. But that's not really the issue here. The chief knows I will raise the alarms if we have to. I'm not worried about that. But I think just a general level of transparency that's more than, oh, well, we read 14,000, license plates this week, I don't think that's enough for the public. There's a middle ground here somewhere that this committee needs to do work on.
And Chairman Blossom, I think you hit the nail on the head, is it's trying to find where is the sweet spot between respecting that there's criminal intelligence investigation that we can't broadcast to the public and letting everybody know, here's what we're doing with this. Like, this is what we're using it for, like, and trying to build like that trust level, the comfort level that that's not being mistreated. And so that's something that I think a question all of the council or committee members could ask themselves is, how do you build that trust while respecting that line that there is with the criminal investigations, that we can't just put all of that out there in the public? I think to your original question, I think there is a redaction that could be had. We do it in most of our open records requests. You take the redaction software and you'll throw the black box over it, or you'll white it out. I mean, we've done this before. I just don't know how efficient it's going to be, especially when we're working with the software itself. I don't know if it's contemplated for use in that manner. So it would, like, what I'm envisioning is that it would probably look like a lot of screenshots of information where we'd be taking a whiteout pen or doing the black box in Adobe Reader or whatever software and putting the box over the top of everything. And I just don't know if that would be satisfactory to the committee to see it.
And I guess from my perspective, the way that I've always envisioned this is that we would have the team here, the leadership team at the PD, coming forward and saying, we ran it for these types of issues this month. Here's 4 or 5 examples. Let's talk about them. And it's not, oh, we ran this black SUV for this with this license plate. It's, we ran it because we had a domestic issue that occurred here. We were looking for this type of vehicle within a 6-block radius during this time frame, and here's what we found when we looked. Like, I want an assurance that what we're being told about how we're going to use it is exactly what's happening. And then to the team's point, then we get into discussions about, okay, well, is the policy working? Because we're creating a big hindrance. I'm sympathetic to the fact that we need to get it to the right level of officer, right? I'm with you guys in general, but I wanted to be proven that we're doing it right to start with. That's why I wanted to start there. And when you prove it, then we can talk more. That's, to me, this is an ongoing process. And so, to be honest with you, Chief, to start in the first one saying, look, we already got to adjust the policy, we haven't even run a search yet. We're not ready to adjust any policy. The council's already decided on the policy. We need to run some searches and do some oversight. Then we can look at those adjustments.
Chairman Blossom, I agree with you on that. But you know me and my pushbacks. Here's one. We got to get there. We got to turn it on. We have to figure out, this is going to be an ebb and flow, as everyone in this community. There's nothing that's going to be perfect about this. We are going to do the very best we can. We're going to report back. We're going to be transparent. We have been since all of this. We've talked to you about everything, and it's as we figure it out. And you're right, as there's a case, there's going to be an incident number, not just a case, but an incident number for everything. So different than we've been given permission, and we talked about this through the DMV. If you need to view a person's face through the DMV, you get basic information. But if you need to go further than that, you place your reason. Is it criminal? Is it this? And so on. So there's ways for us to get to what you're talking about. And yes, I would love to tout our success stories. That's what we're trying to get to. It's not about trying to adjust things before we even get started. My biggest thing is I can see where the hindrances to what you're talking about are as we're moving towards that. I want to get all of you exactly what you're looking for, and us get what we need. There is a middle ground. So that's where we're trying to get to. So it's not about trying to make adjustments. We are going to have, all of us are going to be making adjustments through this process. It's going to be painful, but we'll get there. Yes, sir.
I just, maybe we're making this harder than it is. Can we talk about what information, somebody said, well, we can't get any data. Well, what data can we get? Can we get, how many hits there were in the last X amount of time reported? Can we get, how many incidents were associated with those hits or with, with a search? Can we get how many searches were done? Can we get what was the reason for the search that was entered? Was it, suspicion of, something or what, how many of those turned into cases? I mean, I think we can get some data. I don't,
Is there a reporting function built into that for that specific thing? That's
Yeah, members of the committee, yeah, you're one step ahead of me here. So I think that like the hits and the hot list hits and things like that, those were things that were automatically in the transparency portal, very, very general data. But there is a lot of different reporting mechanisms within the system itself. Like I said, there's nothing that we can't do that isn't tracked in some capacity within the system. I'm fairly confident that we can be running some of the reports in regards to what you're referring to. I just don't know how specific that's going to be because right now there's not any data to run the report. So it's hard for me to see what that report actually looks like. But when you talk about, there was this many searches by, like you would be able to pull for me, you'd be able to see how many searches I did in some capacity. And you should be able to streamline that for the types of cases and different things like that. It's just difficult because there's no data to be able to show what a report like that looks like. But might not be as much as Chairman Blesson had mentioned, but I'm pretty confident that it would at least hit the mark with some of those things. And those are things that potentially we then would have to weigh on by releasing that. Is there some kind of detriment to doing that with, it might be very obvious if it's something reported on social media of a critical incident, fairly safe to say that's okay that we ran the ALPR system for that type of case. But if there's something that is very sensitive and ongoing, I think we would have to look at that to make a determination whether or not we want that open in an open public forum that we're running a case because people pay attention. People pay attention to what we're doing. And so we're also cognizant of that. But long story short, I think we could run some reports that would hit the mark on at least some of the things that we've talked about.
Tyler, did you have some?
Yeah, I guess my thought on this whole thing kind of as a whole was we were kind of going to get like a list of the searches performed, which we can obviously get all of that data if we needed. We could get all of the hits, and it seems like that might be excessive for us to need to try to sift through. So I think what it kind of boils down to me is we're trying to more or less justify why a search was searched and then to what place it's moved after that. If it goes into a case or if it goes into just an incident or if it wasn't necessary for anything. And I guess off of that, my question is, I feel like if we are able to have two councilmen that can look at some of that stuff on the committee, it would be worth it. You could report to us and we could make a decision of some extent from that. But if we don't have some level, in my opinion, some level of being able to have someone that has access to the justification for why that was brought to a case, I feel it's a little murky at that point. Just my thoughts on that one.
No, I agree. And that's really where my mind was going, was that if we're, for us to do our job, really then we turn into what the chief is, giving us one side of, which is, hey, in experience, they're saying they want to adjust some things policy-wise. And those are perfectly legitimate things that this committee would discuss and bring recommendations to council. Those I expect to be a big part of this process. But the other side of it is the oversight side. And I think that's the part that I don't know that we have a great answer for. And so I want to respect everybody's time. I think we've gotten through, what we can today. We've got some outstanding items that we're working through legally that we're going to be doing. I would ask whether it's a chief, Dale, Justin, if you guys have an idea of when we should get together again. Do you guys want 60 days? You want 90 days? Let this run, see what the data is starting to look like, understand it. What do you guys think?
But quick question while he's, what did we say in the motion that was passed by?
The
Wasn't it
motion was
monthly?
monthly. Yep.
Okay.
And again, there's things that we could adjust there, but at the same time, I want to be a little respectful that they got work to do. So I think we should give you guys the time that you need.
Chairman Blessam and members of the committee. So it's going to take us at least 3 weeks to get officers trained. One of the things I'm cognizant of is that policy has not been, we have the direction on the policy. So the question is, with that direction, do we need to resubmit it for your review? At this point, you haven't made any changes to the policy, and that's fine. We can move on a meeting by meeting basis in terms of that. I think it's ultimately the city council's decision. We can go with the policy that was created with the city council meeting and start our training and get officers out. It would at least be 3 weeks before we actually started using it, before we actually had data, I would say 60 days probably would be a
I
good
mean,
number.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we've been through that policy twice, if not 3 times already.
Yep.
So I mean, for my part, I would say let's go with it until we determine that something needs to be changed. 'Cause
Right. That would be my general thought, although my question to the city attorney is where does this live? Is it, on the title, it says a policy manual, which says to me, I don't know that the council has any purview over it in the first place, but because it's not an ordinance, right?
No, it's not. Generally, policy decisions are left to the department heads. But I just can't recall what the actual direction was from council on this matter. If it was to not turn on the ALPR, do we have that language?
No, I believe it was,
So the way that I would interpret the actions that we took was that we had a vote authorizing it to be turned on. So from my perspective, it could have been turned on the next morning. And to your guys' credit, nice work. You're taking it the right way. You're moving through the process to get there. So that's a good thing. Then we took a series of actions that said, here's how we'd like to see the policy look. And those were specific items that I brought that we voted on, some yay, some nay. That's how that worked. So for me, we were giving policy direction. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know how that works outside of ordinance. We have control over ordinance. So with 2 readings, we actually write law. That's how that works. With a policy manual, I don't know that we even have that purview in the first place. But we certainly have a council direction of what we're expecting. And with that in mind, I would expect most of that was around data retention, searching, that types of stuff. Hardly any of that had anything to do with live or with how the hit list worked or any of that. So what was already in the policy is ready to roll. So my perspective, I would love to see this policy updated to reflect what we said. And then you're free to roll. I mean, that we've made those decisions at the council level.
yeah, I apologize. I didn't have a chance to read this beforehand to double check, but it would be my recommendation that Lieutenant Howe look over and make sure. I believe we had all the changes that Alderman Pittner had proposed the first time. I don't know, and I haven't had a chance to read if the changes that you had proposed and passed had made it. But I would double check that before training happens. But yes, the council did approve for this to be turned on, so.
In that, I mean, this trust is kind of where the root of all of this lies. And so that's my concern, is making sure everyone's on the same page as to where we're at in this whole process. And so council said, turn it on. We've got a policy that can get updated. I guess my recommendation would be to include a copy of the updated final policy with the next council agenda, just maybe attach the city manager's report for the council's review so you can see it. Everybody's got an updated policy on it, and we'll just let them know that that's been turned on. This is the policy that we're operating under, and it can be a discussion point if someone from the council wants to bring that up and ask questions or amend the policy further. That'd be my recommendation with this.
Yeah, I think that would be the council's understanding of where we sit today, was that we've authorized it to be turned on with a set of parameters.
Chairman Blessam and members of the committee, yeah, that is our understanding. But the council did request us to return back with a policy. So from that point on, I just wanted to make sure that I was following what your intention was. So I don't believe that, I mean, as with the rest of our policies, we set the policies, the chief sets the policies in the end. But in this specific one, the intention was to make sure that we were following with what the council wanted. If you're good with it, then absolutely, we'll move forward.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, and Mark, you can certainly see you nodding as well. I think having it as part of Tom's report at the next meeting would meet what we're looking for, and you guys are good to roll. So with that in mind, then you said 3 weeks, but when's a good time for this committee to come back and to have a discussion about how it's going, what you guys are learning, all of that?
Like I said, from my perspective, it would take about 3 weeks to train our officers up. So we're not going to be collecting data for another 3 weeks. So I would say 60 days. That gives us a month to collect data.
Okay. So I guess if I'd be open to a motion to set a meeting, what would we be then? We'd be in May. Is that right? Probably mid-May is a good shot.
Yeah, I would,
May-
mid-May would be a fair.
May 6th is 9 weeks out.
Okay,
That's a Wednesday too.
okay, so do you want to bring a motion to set that?
Sure, I'll bring the motion. Motion to set the meeting for same time on Wednesday, May 6th, 2026.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Tom. Okay, any discussion on that date? Mark, you want to check your calendar just to make sure?
Yeah, it might be.
I am more than open to a friendly amendment on the date itself.
If anything from your side, that's a worry with that date.
I'm likely to be out of town, the first few days of that week. It could be on that Friday or could be Thursday would work for me.
Do you want to push one more week or do you want to push to the Thursday?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So you push the day, push to Thursday.
Thursday's good.
Thursday at 3. Mike, is that good for the 7th?
Yep, that's a week before graduation, so.
Perfect. Okay, so Kyler, are you good with
That
just
works for me.
adjusting your
Yep.
motion to the 7th at 3 p.m.?
Yep, that's good
Okay.
with me.
And the second, you're good with that, Tom? Yep. Okay, sounds good. Any further discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, call the roll.
Colin,
Yes.
Hancock,
Yes.
Cancer,
Yes.
Nason,
Yes.
Blessing.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Okay, Chief, thank you. Nice work. Guys, nice work. I know this has been a lot of work, starting with way back with Flock and everything else, and I appreciate the hard work that's gone into it. And we're going to continue to work through it. So I appreciate that very much. Anything else from anybody? Otherwise, I'd be open to an adjournment motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.